Welcome. Before we get started, I have a couple of small requests. First of all, if everyone could please turn off their phones or put them on airplane mode, that would be most excellent. We don't want any disruptions. Secondly, at the request of the Framingham Fire Department, can I please have everyone rise and recognize their nearest exits? So can everyone stand up and make sure they know how to get out of here? And then please stay standing for our national anthem. Today, the national anthem will be sung by Charles C.T. Moses. C.T. is a 30-year Framingham resident who has performed, recorded, or managed more than 1,000 shows. He is the founding sound engineer of the Amazing Things Arts Center. He's also a barbershop harmony singer with the New Sound Assembly Chorus that meets in St. Andrews on Thursday nights. CT was the Mass Bay commencement speaker in 2014. He's an Eagle Scout and past Scoutmaster for Framingham Troop 210. He's an unemployed disabled veteran. Please welcome CT.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And a rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, CT. Hello, and welcome to the October 28th mayoral and at-large debate, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Framingham and the MetroWest Daily News. Special thanks to the Town of Framingham, the Government Channel, the League of Women Voters, and the MetroWest Daily News for all the hard work in creating today's debate. Thanks to the candidates for taking their time today and many other days serving their community. I also want to thank everybody in the audience and those at home for taking their time to be part of this historic event. My name is Mike Croce, and I have been a member of the League of Women Voters of Framingham for 4 months, focusing most of my energy on putting together events like this. But wait, I'm not a woman. That's okay. The League of Women Voters is actually open to everybody. So I joined the League because I was inspired by their nonpartisan mission that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. Our nonpartisan policy means that we do not endorse or oppose any candidate in any race. Everyone in Framingham will vote for 5 candidates in 4 different races on Tuesday, November 7th, and we strive to help educate residents to make the most informed decisions possible. Beyond today's debate, we offer a couple of resources that you can use at home. The League has gathered a set of Q&A and other relevant information about most candidates through the Vote 411 program. Simply go to vote411.org and put in your home address to find information about all 4 races in your district. For a consolidation of relevant information about all candidates, please also visit framinghamelectioninfo.org. This site is an aggregation of information from dozens of sources and is a great one-stop shop to educate yourself about all of the races. As previously mentioned, this event has been co-sponsored by the MetroWest Daily News. Rob Hainison, the Sunday editor, will tell you about their organization now.
Thanks, Mike. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this event and all the candidates who have participated in this momentous time for Framingham. I've been a reporter or editor at the MetroWest Daily News covering Framingham for 17 years now, and it's great to see some familiar faces here, along with plenty of new ones. Coming over here today, I was actually thinking about a memorable Framingham character who's no longer with us. Mal Schultz was a longtime town meeting member and veteran who died several years ago. Those of you who remember Mal will likely agree with me that calling Mal cranky is a bit of a kindness. Even with his sometimes grumpy demeanor, I always enjoyed talking with Mal as a reporter because of his unfiltered opinion, regardless of whether I agreed with him or not. I valued him as a source, but I respected him so much as a person because of his commitment to his community and his desire to make it better. That's how I remember his motivation, and that's what I've seen on display so well in this community for the past year during the city charter vote and the preliminary election, and now the campaign to November 7th finale. Regardless which candidate you supported, or if you were pro-city or pro-town, the candidates and voters we interviewed all had a similar goal: to improve Framingham, and I believe our coverage has documented that effort and informed voters. Our reporters Jim Haddadine and Jonathan Dame have done excellent and exhaustive work writing about all of the candidates who will appear on the ballot, as well as explaining the newly drawn districts. We have had dozens of stories in print and online, podcasts, videos, and if you want to catch up, you can go to our website at MetroWestDailyNews.com. Events like this and the campaigns of many of the candidates rely on committed volunteers. They give up their time and energy for this, so please, if you would, a short round of applause for all of the volunteers. Years ago, I wrote in a column that local elections are the most important ballot you cast because the results have an immediate and direct effect on you and your community. I still believe that. And I also believe that November 7th is the most important election Framingham will undertake in the 17 years that I've been here. So please, get out and vote and make your new city. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So in today's debate, we'll have two sections, one for at-large council candidates and one for mayoral candidates. The four people on stage are all running for at-large council, which means they are elected by voters in the entire city. They are currently in order from left to right, as you would see it top to bottom on the ballot. I will introduce them from left to right and ask that they rise when I call their names. George King, Pablo Maya, Christine Long, and Cheryl Tully Stoll. These are the four candidates running for at-large council. On November 7th, you'll be voting for two of them because there's two open seats, so please keep that in mind as you watch today's debate. The candidates will now be doing the debate, which will be put together by our moderator, Margaret Cope. The moderator for today's debate, as I said, is Margaret Cope. Margaret is a longtime member of the League of Women Voters of Lexington, currently serving as the convener. She has been elected to the Lexington Town Meeting for the past 33 years and is a past school committee member in Lexington. Margaret has moderated candidate events in several towns, most recently in Arlington. Please welcome Margaret Cope.
Thank you, Mike. It's my pleasure to be here today for what I consider to be an historic event in Framingham as you change from being a town to a city. So I'm very interested in hearing the debate today. So before we get started, let me talk a little bit about what the rules and procedures will be. The debate is staged in a way that does not promote or advance one candidate over the other. Candidates are placed in the order in which they appear on the ballot, from left to right. I will ask the questions. I will be asking them the questions, and then they will answer them. And there are timers sitting at the table in the front down here. If you can see them, they will be raising the cards. At the end, we will be asking candidates to. They will answer our questions, but they'll also have an opportunity to ask one other candidate a question. We would ask that the candidates speak only one at a time, that there's no interruptions, and that we refrain from applause during this time so that we can have the time to get more information out. Candidates will refrain from personal attacks during this debate. After a 1-minute opening statement by each candidate, I will be asking them questions. Most of these questions come from members of the public, with a few added from the League of Women Voters and from the MetroWest Daily News. Candidates will each be given no more than 1 minute to answer each questions. There will be no rebuttals for the first set of questions. The second set of questions will allow for rebuttals, and I will make it clear which one is which. For questions that allow rebuttals, candidates will have 30 seconds each for their rebuttal. And we have chosen these lengths of time in order to keep the program moving and also to get as many questions as possible into the hour. A green card indicates 30 seconds left. Could you just lift one of those up so people can see where they are? Thank you. A yellow card indicates 5 seconds left. And the red card indicates that time is up. So we will now go into the program for this afternoon. We'll start with the opening comments, and we will start with Mr. King. Mr. King.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to attend on this beautiful fall afternoon. Thank you for the League for having this today. As I run for City Council, I'd like to highlight two, I think, unique qualifications that often don't go together that I'm centering my campaign on. The first would be my experience. I understand how large governmental organizations run. I understand how Framingham works. I had the chance to run Framingham as its town manager from 1999 to 2005. At the time of my stewardship, we were transforming then from an executive administrative form of government to a town manager form of government. I'm proud to say that many of the things I initiated, many of the structures are still in place today. The second qualification I would highlight is independence. As involved as I was for many years, I've not been incumbent in the operation of Framingham's government for over a decade. The knowledge I have of the operation, combined with the distance I have to reflect on it, I believe is a needed and valuable perspective from the new City Council. And I look forward to demonstrating this afternoon through these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
Thank you very much for letting me be here. My name is Pablo Maya. I live in Framingham for almost 20 years. And the reason I'm running is to have the city more modernized. I think it's the time. The town meeting members did a great job, also the selectmen, but right now this is the time to change the city to more modern and with bringing new companies and create new jobs, and that's what I'm thinking about. That's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Christine Long. I'm currently your elected planning board chair, and yes, I've been in town government for over 2 decades. I served on town meeting for 11 years. I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 5. I served on Standing Committee of Public Works for 10 years. I chaired that for several of those years, as well as chairing government study for 4 out of 6 years that I served on that committee, and several other subcommittees to do with other relative matters. So I am running as your independent voice to be representing my current constituents in an expanded role with my unique set of skills that I bring to the table that no one else running brings. And that has to do with planning, zoning, economic development, and my desire to see the tax rate go down in this town and to bring more business development and redevelopment in. So I ask for your vote on November 7th, and thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
I want to thank the League for hosting today and for all of you for taking time out of a beautiful Saturday to come hear us. I grew up in Framingham. I learned to read at Dunning School, skate at Loring Arena, swim at Lake Washaycom. I also learned how to be a good neighbor on Jean Street, Lockland Ave, and Sullivan Terrace. I want the people living here today and in the future to have as great a quality of life as I've had. I'm running to continue the work that I've begun as your selectman for the last 3.5 years. This work includes downtown revitalization, protection of open space, the quality of life in our neighborhoods, making a good school system even better, enhancing services for our seniors, getting a handle on our traffic issues, reining in unsustainable spending and tax rates, and responsible neighborhood-friendly development. I will also work to give the people of Framingham a smooth transition from town to city. I have respect for our past and a vision for our future.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. We now go to the first question, and Mr. Maya, you will be the first one to answer this question. We have heard consistently that traffic is a major problem in Framingham. Beyond the traffic commission that the charter requires, what specific solutions do you envision to alleviate our traffic concerns? Mr. Maya.
Yes, the way I see it is buses, express buses that, like in Watertown has, Waltham has, that can bring the person to the job in the right time, and they're sure that when they leave the work, they can take their bus and go home. If we have that for, let's say you start with 10 buses and each of them carries 30 people, we have, quite a number of cars out of the street. That will save us a lot in parking space, in the traffic. I think that's the best thing that works for us right now. It's one of the most important things I think it is. Thank you. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long.
Currently, the town has just completed the first phase of the Master Transportation and Traffic Plan that the Planning Board contributed $60,000 to. The next phase is coming up to solve this issue and to work on this issue in conjunction with the first phase of the economic development plan that the Planning Board is currently funding tentatively for $50,000. So with those two components, and including the zoning initiatives that we continue to work on the Planning Board, those will address the traffic and how we're going to meet those needs for future development, including the pedestrian plan that we have in place. We have several plans that will work towards solving the traffic problems, but we also need to co-opt MassDOT into this conversation at the state level.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
Well, the traffic problem we have is multifaceted. Number one, a lot of it is cars that are coming from other towns to go through Framingham to get somewhere else. That, unfortunately, unless other towns adopt public transportation and we have a much better regional route system, that is going to be something that we're always going to have to work around. As far as local traffic is concerned, we do have the RTA that is based here, the MetroWest Regional Transit Authority, and I have been serving on that board as Framingham's rep for the last year. And we are looking at different ways to improve service. We have encouraged people to use the train in and out of Boston. We have redeveloped that parking lot down there. We, as the Board of Selectmen, we sponsor tax incentives for transit-oriented development where people can walk from apartments downtown to the train station, so there would be no need for cars. And as far as the Traffic Commission is concerned, the charter gives them 2 years to get started. They need to get started day one.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King.
I think by nature I'm an optimistic person, but solving the traffic problem in Framingham that I remember happening from the day I was a little kid, I'm not sure it's going to happen in any of our lifetimes. What I think we can do is mitigate it. I think I said here at the last time we had a forum here, one of the big problems we can do nothing about. We have a whole lot more cars and not a whole lot more road. So that being the problem, by nature, we're going to have more traffic. I think some of the things we can do to mitigate it are things like just scheduling of our construction projects. I think that sometimes we have multiple roads detoured at the same time. So once you get through one detour, you're into the next detour. That type of consideration when we're planning these projects is something that we need to continue to be sure we do, because we're already causing further complications to a difficult situation. I do think the Traffic Commission, as talked about in the charter that Cheryl just mentioned, is critical. Though it takes 2 years to put together a traffic department, the Traffic Commission itself is going to be appointed immediately in the first 45 days of the charter. So I think that's a focus that the government has not had on the issue up until now that I'm hopeful will make a difference, or begin to make a difference.
Thank you, Mr. King. We'll now go to question 2, and Ms. Long will start with this. Both mayoral candidates have said that they would hire someone to focus on sustainability. What are the top 2 or 3 things you would like to see this person focus on in 2018?
So this person should focus on more green initiatives, obviously, so to make the community sustainable and to make it affordable to live here in Framingham. So I haven't really given, I have to be honest, not a lot of thought to that question, but sustainability obviously is a very important thing. So I would hope that the council will work together to come up with what are the most important initiatives towards that goal.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully Stull.
I think one of the opportunities that the energy manager, which I believe is a position you're referring to that's been spoken about, the RTA has just installed a CNG facility at the Blandon Avenue facility. The town of Framingham's DPW headquarters is a block away. We can get grant money to convert many of our vehicles over to CNG, and we can start buying CNG vehicles, which are cleaner, much more fuel efficient, and quieter. So right off the bat, there is a huge opportunity for us coming out of the gate. I also think that we need to be encouraging businesses around here and office buildings and large commercial sites to put more solar and use more solar. We've been buying net metering credits from private organizations since I've been on the board, and it saves the town money on our electric bill, but we also have a greener environment. And the other thing is we need to look at is how many miles town vehicles are traveling in Framingham. We have a lot of town vehicles, and when you see 3 or 4 of them and pass them, it gets a little frustrating. So we need to look at that.
Thank you, Ms. Tully Stull. Mr. King.
I think there's many things a municipality can do by hiring an energy manager, though I don't think it's a solution to all problems. In the school district I worked for, we trained our facilities director in energy management and got a master's degree in energy management. And some of the things we did were very basic things that sound crazy, but they work, namely have an audit of where you're using the energy within the building. We went around the school building and found out how many coffee makers, how many toasters, how many microwaves we had in different spots of the building. And district-wide, between scheduling our air conditioning, scheduling our lights, having the light motion switches, and just putting up reminders, that type of thing, that saves an awful lot of energy. So before you get to any further complicated approaches, those are the types of things a coordinated position can do. There are other sustainability initiatives I think the town should continue to pursue. I think we've done a good job in our recycling areas. I think we should continue to expand that. I also agree with the cars. We do have an awful lot of town vehicles that take an awful lot of gasoline, and for a way to try to measure that would be valuable as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
I think, yes, we have to study from the beginning, and definitely we need to hire people that understand the problem and make it study about it first. And after that, we start doing take the action that is needed to make that work as the way we need it. So I agree with both of the mayors if they hire somebody to do the job first. That's how it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. The third question now for Ms. Tully Stull. Name one aspect of town government that you would like to see improve when the new mayor and city council take office next year.
Customer service. I, as a selectman, have responded to every phone call and every email that I have received in the last 3.5 years. And some of them are people calling because they've had a great experience in one of our departments. And those calls are great to get. But it's very frustrating when someone has bounced around 3 or 4 different departments to get an answer to something when, if an individual had taken ownership within the building and found that answer, that taxpayer would have gotten their money's worth. And one of the things we really need to do is make it easier for people to navigate their own government. And we're a service organization, and we should be holding ourselves to the same standards that we hold Amazon to and anybody else we spend money with. So one of the things that I would like to see improved across the board, we've done better in the last few years, but we're still not where we should be.
Thank you, Ms. Tully Stull. Mr. King.
I think the area that I'm most interested in seeing become improved is fiscal transparency. I think that the fiscal situation in Framingham is certainly not at a crisis, but I think Framingham has become more expensive than we want it to be. I believe that by the city council studying, working with the mayor, our fiscal situation, we can continue to deliver the same excellent services we have at a lesser cost. Now, some people will tell you, well, the last couple of years, we haven't raised the tax rate to the maximum amount. That's true. But we still have one of the highest tax rates in the state. In those same years, we weren't raising it to the maximum amount. We were having a surplus of $8–9 million in town that particular year. If we had cut that in half, if we had said, okay, we'll take half the surplus, so we still have a pretty healthy surplus, and we'll give the other half of the surplus back to the taxpayers in those years, we could have cut our tax rates during those years. We could have reduced our tax levy during those years. So those are the type of opportunities I'd like to see discussed more publicly and more in depth to try to make this work for all of us for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya?
Yes, I think one of the most important things for me is the integration of the city on all the communities. Right now, the way I see it, there's a lot of different communities living in Framingham with speaking different languages and doing different things. So English as a second language is one of the very important things that all of us who speak in English in the city, even if you speak a second language at home, but it's important and makes it very easy for us at the traffic, hospitals, emergency times, schools. So this is very important that all who speak English first and integrate the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long?
So for me, economic development is my #1 concern. Working with small businesses, particularly the business owners that own downtown, needs to be addressed. For some reason, we don't have an economic development department that does any kind of marketing, sales, or community outreach and involvement with these businesses. I hear it all the time sitting on the planning board. The permitting process, I used to think it was just the planning board that there was the issue. It's more than just that. It's how the permitting process is. It's confusing, it's complicated, it's expensive, and it does not promote business development. Without commercial development, we are going to continue, all 18,600 residences here that are paying taxes, we are picking up the burden of that tax. There's only 865 commercial entities and a drop of 3% in the last year. So I'm concerned about that as a taxpayer and a homeowner.
Thank you, Ms. Long. We'll now go to question 4, and we will be starting with Mr. King. The charter currently allows city councilors to serve on other city boards, commissions, and committees. Do you think that city councilors should be allowed to serve on other city boards, committees, commissions, or committees? Why or why not?
So I was on the Charter Commission, and I must admit, when we wrote the charter, I was under the impression we had put in a provision that allowed us, that disallowed that said you cannot serve on anything other than the city council. It may have been an oversight. I also believe it's how you interpret language. It's in there right now. There's a language that may indicate that has an or in there. So it's a question whether you bring a modifier forward with it. So I'm not convinced completely that it doesn't say that now, but I do not believe city councilors should be able to serve on any other boards at the town. I think the job of city council is enough, and I think we should have made that clearer in the charter. I take responsibility for that. But I think going forward, that's the way it should be. It's an encompassing job of itself. And certainly if I'm lucky enough to be elected to city council, I can assure everyone I will not be looking to join any other town boards or committees during that period of time.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya?
No, I don't think so. I think each of us have to do their own job and leave the other ones who are expert or prepared to do the things that need to be done. So I think we should just do the job that we're designated for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long?
So, as you heard from Mr. King, that in the charter, from my interpretation of it, there is nothing that prevents somebody serving on a board that's appointed and being an elected official at the same time. I've served as an elected official and been on many appointed boards. During that time, successfully done a lot for the town, in my opinion, and others, and I don't see why that should be a problem. I think if you can manage your time and you're capable and you have a particular skill set, I don't see why you should be eliminated from being able to be involved. However, if there's boards that you are on and you're trying to be appointed to a board that would be a conflict of interest, then that would be a different thing. But I think if you have the ability, time, and skill set, and you have that value added to a particular board or commission, I don't see why you should prevent someone from serving on that committee.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully Stoll?
I, like a lot of people, believe that this charter puts a lot of power in too few hands. And with the city council and the mayor, we're talking about 12 hands having a great deal of power. I don't think that it would be appropriate for anybody to serve as a city councilor and then take more power within the government. I consider it double dipping.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. We'll now go to question 5, and Mr. Maya, you will be the first to answer. What will you do to ensure that local businesses can thrive in Framingham?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. What will you do to ensure that local businesses can thrive in Framingham?
One of the things is the support with the town, with the city, of course, and new opportunities, letting people know that we have the space, we have the desire to have them here, and give the support, do business local. I think this will be the most important, is just the city to support the business, the local business.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long?
So that's one of my main concerns, is the lack of business support and the lack of programming for business development and redevelopment. So for me, I would want to do, and I already currently do this, outreach to businesses to find out what they need, find out what they're lacking, find out what we can do better to improve. The planning board has improved our processes probably 1,000% in the last 5 years because of business outreach and speaking with them and knowing what they want, just as we have built up our communication with residents as well to provide better communication and more transparency. So for me, I would like to see more working directly with the downtown proponents. There's a couple of business owners down there that own most of the property. So it is beyond me why economic development has not worked with them to develop those properties.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll?
Yes, the first thing I would look to do, and I've already spoken with some folks about it, is to establish a small business roundtable in Framingham where all different types of businesses from all different areas can come, get together, learn from each other, inform us as to what their needs are. It's not a static thing. The needs change. You look at how the economy has changed. And so much of it is now technology-based. I also would like to see us, bringing in, small business administration to do classes and courses to help our local small businesses stay up to date. They don't have the same kind of resources that larger businesses do, but they're the ones who are really fueling the economy in our community. And they haven't had a loud enough voice to date, and I want to give them that voice.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King?
So I think Framingham is a story in some regards, not to over-dramatize it, but of haves and have-nots when it comes to business. The big businesses, the Shoppers Worlds, the Bows, the Staples, as much as I appreciate having them here, they're going to survive here and they're going to be fine. It's the small business I'm concerned for in Framingham, and a lot of it comes back to what I talked about earlier, which was cost. If you buy a small business building in Framingham, the buildings along Union Ave or the gas stations or any types of small local business, the tax rate for those businesses is nearing $40 per thousand. So the average business, that might be $7 or $8 a square foot they're paying just for their taxes before they pay for their mortgage, they pay their operations or anything like that. So that's an issue that we have to address for our small businesses, our locally grown small businesses. Otherwise, it's not going to be economically feasible for them to be here. Many years ago, I was a small business person in Framingham. And it's a scary place to be when you're an independent business person trying to make your own money, pay your health insurance, all that type of thing. And to have to pay $8 per square foot in taxes is a concern that we have to address.
Thank you, Mr. King. We'll now go to question 6, and the first person to answer will be Ms. Long. One function of the City Council is to provide checks and balances over the appointments of the mayor. How active do you plan to be in reviewing of mayoral appointments? What concerns, if any, do you have regarding mayoral appointments?
So I plan on being totally active in that regard. As a former small business owner who's interviewed and hired many people and fired many people, and currently chair of the planning board who reviews applicants that come into the board for to be hired, I would be very interested to make sure in this regard that the town or the city is represented equally and in fair representation, because currently there is no representation on the south side of this town, and I have a problem with that because I think the greatest needs happen to be on the south side of the town and they need to be represented. So I think this continual habit of appointing people that are all on the north side of town or in one particular northwest quadrant needs to stop.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
Yes, This is probably the most important thing that the council is going to do, because this helps shape the rest of government and the work that gets done. And these appointments, for the most part, are non-paid, although there are some salaried folks who are included. I don't have a litmus test for appointees. I never have. I think we need a diversity of opinions on different boards and commissions, because Framingham has a diversity of opinions, and if we don't represent them, we're not going to be doing our job. I look for somebody's qualifications as to the role they're seeking. I look at what their temperament is and if they can work well with others and not be disruptive. And I want to see a diversity that represents this community not only geographically, but ethnically, and people who we haven't seen before. I want to bring some new people into the process.
Thank you. Mr. King.
I think the role of oversight and approval of appointments from the mayor is twofold. When it comes to town division of department heads, excuse me, I do think it's critical the council take an activist role, at least, in understanding who's being appointed to these important positions, what their background is, and what they bring to the town. When it comes to multi-member bodies, I think that the look needs to be not so much at the individual, but at the representation that we've talked about that's coming to the bodies, to make sure the mayor is appointing a broad array of people who with various interests to the multi-member bodies. So I think, as I say, the council needs to be an activist. It needs to be on top of those things. But at the same point, there has to be a recognition that the mayor does have these rights of appointments. And unless the appointments are particularly egregious, I think the council should try to give some deference to the mayor as the mayor tries to shape the government in the manner that they have been elected to do for 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
I think we have to work with the mayor and do the decisions together and try to choose the right person for the right job. That's what's the most important to me. That's what I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. The next question is a little bit different now. We're going to ask each of the candidates to ask one of their opponents a question. And again, you will have 1 minute to answer that question, and we do start with Mr. King. And you get to pick which opponent you get to ask.
So, okay. Wasn't quite ready for that one, but I'll see what we can do. So I'll ask Cheryl, I guess. I heard, because it's an area, as you know, that I'm interested in, and you talked about taxes and your concerns like mine as to how to keep the tax rate controlled and that type of thing. How do you see your role in the council different than it has been in the selectmen as to your ability to do that? As you know, the selectmen have some role in that, and the council will have a different role in that. How do you see the difference, and what do you see your ability more in the council to influence than you've been able to do as a selectman?
I think the difference is there's a couple of pieces. One, the selectmen have a smaller group of folks to deal with, and then town meeting approves the budget. I do believe that as a council, we should be working with the mayor and with staff actively and putting forth, what we think are priorities that we should be doing and shouldn't be doing, and sharing that information so that the mayor has an opportunity to understand what the priorities of the community are. We are spending too much money, and there are things that we need to be reducing, and that would be one of the things that I would be speaking out about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Maya, it's now your turn to ask somebody up here a question.
I asked George, what do you think is the most important thing that we have to be done first once the change to a city?
That's a good question. I think clearly there has to be a recognition that the transformation to a new form of government is going to be a challenge. It always is. Like I stated a little bit in my opening statement, when I became town manager, I was the second town manager for Framingham, but I was the first town manager appointed as town manager. In other words, my predecessor had been the executive administrator. And when I took over, there was a definite necessity of having people to understand what their roles are and what roles they should follow. The role of the Board of Selectmen changed dramatically. And for selectmen who were on it at the time, it was a major change. They went from being essentially in charge, the executive, to being the policymaker for the town. And I think for the most part, the selectmen did a great job with that, and I admire that. And I think the same thing happens here. We have to understand our roles. As councilors, we're going to have to understand the role we have. It's a role to give oversight. It's not a role to run the town. And that's going to be different for people. So I think assuming our roles properly, understanding our roles, and working collaboratively together with the mayor to make them work is the biggest challenge. I think it's a really good question, because I think that is what the town is going to face in January.
Thank you. Ms. Long?
I think I'll ask Cheryl. So the question I would have for Cheryl is that currently we have several apartments that have come in that have just been permitted in the downtown area, one on Concord Street, one on Waverly Street. So I will ask you that multifamily projects, how do we plan to redevelop the downtown when, from my opinion, I've seen that there's no other community in the whole state that has an apartment building in its downtown area directly across from transit without having some kind of commercial component.
Number one, we looked at the commercial component and we spoke with both of the developers. One of the developers, that project was permitted without any commercial component by the planning board before the Board of Selectmen even heard from them. So clearly that wasn't a problem with you at the time. The other one, we worked very hard to get more retail on the Wood Properties project across the street where Starts With a Fabric Place is. Because of the spending power in downtown Framingham right now, we had a hard time doing that. And roofs over retail is the philosophy, and that's what we're looking for. And we had to start somewhere, and we pushed as far as we could get. And hopefully that will bring more retail in, because that's the goal of the project.
Thank you. And now, Ms. Tully-Stull, you get to ask someone a question.
Ms. Long, you stated earlier that you saw no problem with somebody serving in both positions. Do you intend to serve on the planning board if you're elected to the city council?
I knew that question was coming, so that was the obvious target. So currently I am the chair of the planning board, and right now we have several active applications. So it would be irresponsible of me to have to resign from the planning board during that application process, because it would definitely harm all the applications that are in process and anything that would be processed in interim. However, once those applications are done, that would be a consideration for me to review and to see how that would play out. But currently, no, I cannot resign from the planning board unless I intended to harm all the projects that are in front of the board.
Thank you. Okay, we now move to the first question that we will have rebuttals from the candidates for. The 1-minute response for each candidate, we will go in order, and we're going to start with Mr. Maya this time. Then the rebuttals will be 30 seconds, and we will start with Mr. Maya also for the rebuttal. So the first question, Mr. Maya. Framingham is a very diverse community. Specific districts have had low voter turnout and few people willing to serve on committees or town meeting. How would you address this issue to ensure that all voices are heard?
I think we should bring more business to the side of Framingham that is the south side. They're the one who doesn't kind of forget it from the town, from the city. And if we do that and integrate them with the city, I think that's the chance of bringing more people to pay attention on city politics.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long.
So currently, the planning board does a lot of community outreach. We just are working on Exit 13 study, and we had a community meeting the other night on that. I do meetings in the morning for the steering committee, and a lot of our plan is how we get community involved. So outreach, I'll knock on doors, I go to neighborhoods. That the plan to continue Southeast Framingham study and several other studies is actually to go door to door with flyers, talking to residents, and having as much community involvement as possible, and trying to get people involved in town government. As I've gone knocking on doors all over town for the last 4 or 5 months, I have talked to people and invited them in to get interested in applying for these positions that will come up, committees that are going to be available for them to serve on, and there has been interest. It's just you have to reach out to people so that they know they're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stull.
One of the things we've changed on the Board of Selectmen this year is our recruitment process for committees. We've gotten more aggressive about outreach. We have gotten a lot of different advertising resources, and we're going back over the applications we've had in the past. The last 3 committees that we appointed, we had to go to a 5-member Board of Health. We had an embarrassment of riches, only being able to select 2 people out of the 20 qualified candidates. We also then needed the Bylaws Review Committee, and had, once again, a large number of new people coming into the process. And this has been the case throughout the appointment since we've made some changes. We need to do outreach, though, to other communities. A lot of what we are seeing are people who read traditional news media, and we're not going to the ethnic radio stations. We're not going to places where people don't read the MetroWest Daily News or The Source. And we need to find some more diverse and broad ways so that we get committees and commissions that reflect this community.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King.
There's no question this has been a problem for Framingham for many years, where we have not had broad and equal representation across the entire town, and the south side of town, the higher number teen precincts being the biggest victim of that. I think that when I was on the Charter Commission, we recognized that, and though we did some things like stated a few minutes ago, like maybe we missed in the charter, one thing I think we did really well in the charter was assured representation from each district by both having the school committee elected on a district basis and the city council elected mainly, with the exception of these people here, on a district basis. I think we guaranteed that we were going to have representation from all aspects of the community, and likely various groups who have not been represented in the past. I think if you look at the candidates who are running right now, that's happening. It's a start, but it's an important start. It's how you build, it's how you get other members of the community comfortable getting involved in the town government by guaranteeing some slots like we have now to make sure underrepresented areas are fully represented. So I'm encouraged and hopeful as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. King. And now for the 30-second rebuttal to these questions, Mr. Maya. It's the same question, but what can you say further now?
I just saying that I'd love to see maybe the south of Framingham as a cultural side of Framingham. We can't compete with the north of Route 9 and where all the big businesses are. And that's what makes the difference between north and south, because there's much more money on that area than in here. So I think if we create something like that everybody from there can come to this side instead of us going there, we'll integrate much more into the city.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long.
Hi. So I think that transparency and reaching out and community involvement is so important in every aspect of the government that it needs to be increased, highlighted, bolded, italicized, that we need to have as much input from the community in our new government going forward. And I worked really hard on the Charter Commission, getting signatures and getting that on the ballot, because I really felt that there was a lack of transparency, accountability, and representation in the city.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
I think one of the things we need to do is look at trying to attract younger folks with younger families. I mean, I look around this room, and you folks are my age. Except you with those two adorable little boys. But that's not representation. That is representation of certain demographic groups, whereas we have another huge demographic group that without childcare options is unable to serve. And I think we need to look at being more flexible and finding ways where we can combine things so that we can engage people in some of our city government that we couldn't do in our town.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King.
I would just reiterate what I said before. I think the districts make a difference, and I think you can see it in this election. If you look at the districts that have been historically underrepresented, there are contests for those offices with people who are from different areas and different groups and have been traditionally part of Framingham town government. Here in the race we're in right here for City Council at large, it's not that different, okay? And that's probably because it's in that, most of us have been, with all due respect to Mr. Meyer at least, most of us have been around involved in this government for a long time. So I think you see it happening in the districts, and I think it will continue. I think it will build and grow.
Thank you, Mr. King. We now go to the second question, which also will allow time for a rebuttal. And with this one, we will start with Ms. Long. The question is, economic development and new businesses are important for Framingham. What industries will be important to the city's economic future, and how will you draw them to Framingham? Ms. Long.
So Framingham is pretty unique, and what I feel we really need is more small business-oriented companies in Framingham, particularly downtown. We have a lot of empty office space that could be filled easily, but restaurants and associated businesses need to be in the downtown, in all those small spaces. You can't get enough restaurants, in my opinion. You can't get enough amenities. We need more things, and unfortunately, we lost King's Bowling. That should have been down on Flutie Pass, which did get permitted by the planning board, but unfortunately, there was a conflict with iFly in the Natick portion, which made the whole deal fall apart. So we would not get King's Bowling. But those types of activities, that combined with artist studios, so you have art studios, restaurants, and entertainment are probably the most important things to draw people here if we're going to have a number of apartments and other kind of new building coming in.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really need to do is look at what we want in our community. Determine what industries we think will fit best, which industries will work better together and complement each other and be able to do business with each other to get that multiplier effect. And then instead of sitting around waiting for somebody to show up and look at a piece of space, go out and aggressively start marketing ourselves to them. We need to sell Framingham. We don't want to, sitting here waiting for somebody to do us a favor isn't getting us anywhere. And we need to be more aggressive in our approach to who we recruit so that we're recruiting people that, when somebody does show up, we don't say, oh, no, we don't want you, because that just gives us a bad reputation. Whereas if we go out and show people what we have to offer, what it means to their business, what we can provide their workforce, then we have a story to tell that will give us the kind of economic engine that we want to have.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King.
So I think we've done pretty well in our industrial and office parks and our shopping centers, keeping them full over the years. That's always a challenge, and we always need to keep an eye on it, because as we see retail changes dramatically and is changing dramatically. Is that going to have an impact eventually in the shoppers' worlds, et cetera, which give us a lot of tax revenue? I don't know. So far, no, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I think a focus on the downtown businesses and how we can incubate new businesses in that area is important. I think the only way you do it is to get people into the downtown, and that's why, though I have some trepidation about the great number of apartments being proposed in different areas of this town, I think the apartments in downtown Framingham, hopefully they'll be built. I'm still not 1,000% convinced that's going to happen, but hopefully they'll be built, because I think bringing people into that area gives you the basis of people you need to then redevelop and bolster the businesses that are there, the restaurants and things like that, the things we've seen in the Walthams of the world, which are really very similar to Framingham, I think can be done. And one of the big key similarities we have is people who live in the downtown area in those places.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
I agree with Cheryl about selling Framingham. Working with real estate, we should first talk to the owners of the properties and see what they want to do, and then the neighbors to see what they like to see there. And then once we have that, we can advertise to the state, to the country, to the world, and bring the business in. This is one of the very important things. The other thing I think is that we should do is like have something like they have in Boston, the half shelf, that we can bring everybody together on a special day, on a Christmas time, on New Year's Eve, or a local school. So big enough for New Year's Eve, and with enough space also for a local high school to do their performance, their presentation. And this could be done on this side of the town where everybody can come. And there's a lot of space that we can find around here. And I think this is one of the best things that we can do it for this side.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Now it's time for a 30-second rebuttal, starting with Ms. Long.
So the planning board has just put out a RFP, which is a request for proposals for economic development plan. So without that baseline information that will tell us what we need to improve, what we need to develop, what the city going forward will need for precisely that, combined with the transportation plan study and all the other studies that we have. We have lots of studies in this town, so all those need to be combined together and to give us a good barometer of where we're going.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
I think one of the other things we need to look at is our creative economy. And one of the things that brings people into communities to use the restaurants, to go to the stores, is festivals and art shows and things of that nature. We have a lot of very talented people in this community, and one of the things that we haven't done enough of is having different kinds of festivals. We've got multiple cultures living here. We could have some great weekend activities, and we haven't availed ourselves of that.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King.
I agree with the festival idea. That it's always worked well. I think there's no doubt about that. I think we've had too many plans in this town, and there's nothing wrong with planning. We should continue to plan, but, you know, and even when I was town manager many years ago, we seemed to have a lot of plans. I think we need to stop talking to people about what they want to do with their buildings. They want to make money off their buildings. That's why they invested in them. That's why they bought buildings. They want to fill their buildings up. I think we have to make it possible for them to do that. So I think we have to become a little bit more action-oriented and learn from the other communities who've been successful doing that. And I do think we may be on our way to doing that, but I think planning sometimes we have to go beyond planning sometimes.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
I'm sorry, I just...
Your rebuttal to the second question about new businesses and economic development, new businesses. You had a question earlier. And
Yes.
Now, do you have any response now that you've heard their
I'm
responses?
sorry, I got confused.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
No, I understand that investors want money with their business, but we also need to know that fits in the town, in the city, and I think the small business doesn't have that problem, but the big companies who bring a lot of jobs to the town, to the city, they're the ones that we need to look at it and see exactly what they want to do with the property.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. We'll now go to the third question with a rebuttal, and this will be the last question before we go to the closing statements from the candidates. And this one we will be starting with Ms. Tully Stoll. The question is, residential development is one of the most heavily debated issues in this election. New growth will generate tax revenue, but some residents feel there are too many projects in the pipeline threatening to increase traffic and strain government services. What is your position on residential development in Framingham?
We've got a major issue with some of the projects that are being proposed right now. We are in jeopardy of losing the majority of the open space that is left in town to residential development. On top of that, we've got apartment complexes that are being proposed that don't have a strategic purpose like revitalizing downtown. The project up at Staples Boulevard, I wrote a letter to the editor 2 weeks ago. There's nothing in that for the people of Framingham. We take a piece of commercial property off the tax rolls in perpetuity to put apartments up there that are going to require town services, generate significantly less revenue, and we're going to get nothing for that. Zero. And we then have companies that we have nurtured and we want to expand in Framingham who will have to expand somewhere else because that commercial property will no longer be available.
Thank you, Ms. Tully Stoll. Mr. King.
Certainly residential development has always been an issue. I do think well-planned apartments, like I said a few minutes ago, can make sense, especially in the downtown area. I do think the issue of open space is a critical issue in this community. In some regards, when I was town manager, I'm actually pleased with the fact we created some open space in Framingham by starting the first phase of the Cushing Park project, by tearing down the Roosevelt School and putting a park in that neighborhood. Areas that are relatively densely populated that we were able to create as long-lasting open space. We have open space in other areas of the town too, the Eastleigh Farm being one in particular, that I would hate to see that become a residential development. So I think we need to be careful as to where we put the residential developments and what the characteristics of those residential developments are. If they're apartment buildings, where are they going and what are we trying to accomplish by putting them there? You know, residential house developments, the over 55s that we have at Millwood in places, may be a good idea, but I'm a little concerned about oversaturation of that, and sometimes those can cause longer term problems. So I think we have to be careful with residential development going forward.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
I agree with Mr. King that we have to be very careful because Framingham is a very expensive city to live right now. And if we build too much and then something happens, we have a lot of empty spaces, or we might have to, if it's not, we're going to have a lot of very expensive properties that most of us are not going to be able to afford to live here. So this is something that to be studied very carefully and with expertise people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Long.
So the problem with this is I'm not interested in developing the whole city with residential, but the problem is the zoning. And the problem is that there's no outreach to develop the city the way we want it developed. So if we get applications coming in, then the planning board, which is the permitting authority, and they have no choice but to process applications, and if they fit zoning, they have to be approved. You can deny them, but you put yourself in a litigation situation, and then eventually you end up losing anyhow. So the problem is that, no, I'm not interested in seeing that. I want to see the commercial components of this city, especially the manufacturing, which is only probably 3% of our whole zoning map. We keep losing those pieces. Bose just sent out 3,000 square feet of expansion into Brighton Landing. We lost that. We did not get GE. We are not bidding on Amazon. So for me, I want to see more commercial coming in here to pick up that burden of the tax and less residential.
Thank you. Now I'll go to the 30-second rebuttal. Ms. Tully-Stoll.
Yes, I was very frustrated. Worked last summer trying to buy the Millwood Golf Course to keep that as open space. And we got into a situation where the developer who does this for a living was very smart and wooed town meeting with a deal that, yes, we do preserve some open space, but we've lost huge parcels that we will never get back. And town meeting declined to buy it. And we need to find ways to have money assigned when these opportunities come up so that people don't feel so cost resistant to saving something we desperately need.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Mr. King.
I think Millwood's a great example, because I think Millwood is a very unfortunate situation. I think the town did miss the opportunity to buy that, and I really don't, to this day, understand why we did not buy that. The reason the town had the opportunity to buy it was not because they wanted to sell it to us under their good will. It's because they had a tax program over there for many years, which allowed them to pay much reduced taxes for the purposes of having to give us first refusal when and if they ever decide to sell it. We should have been in a position to buy that, and I hope we don't see those types of situations occur again.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Maya.
This is one of the things that I think it's going to be great for us to become a city, because we'll have much more chances to decide to make decisions right away instead of waiting for a long time and miss opportunities. And the city will help that a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. And with that, now we've come to the closing statements from the candidates. They will be 1 minute long, and they will be in the reverse order of the opening statement. So we will be starting with Ms. Tully-Stoll.
I want to thank the League again and thank everyone for your time today. Serving as your selectman for the past 3.5 years has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. This election is important. We will choose the people who will determine how city government will work in Framingham for decades to come. You, the voters, will determine whether our new government will work for all of us or just for a few of us. The folks elected will decide what traditions to keep, new ones to establish, and how the public is treated. They will determine the access the public will have to speaking at meetings, and whether or not they'll be allowed to participate in ongoing discussions, or just sit in the audience watching others decide matters that directly affect us without our input. What type of access will a citizen have to petition their own government? Will there be multiple hurdles to jump through, or will it be a simple participatory process? My professional and civic experience shows me that we make better decisions when we work together. I humbly ask for one of your 2 votes for City Councilor at Large on Tuesday, November 7th.
Thank you, Ms. Tully-Stoll. Ms. Long.
So on November 7th, the voters will make the decision, and I have a lot of faith in voters reviewing people's positions and listening to what people have to say here, and hoping that they, again, I trust in the voters that they will make the right decision and put people in charge that have represented them, that are willing to listen to them, that are collaborative, cooperative, and open to all representation throughout the city of Framingham. I got to get used to saying that. So on November 7th, I hope I earn your vote, and I do mean earn, because I would like to continue to serve you in an expanded role on that date.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Mr. Maya.
As you see, I'm here. I'm the only one who's not a professional, as everybody else. But I want to say that it's Framingham has been a town for over 300 years, I believe, and now next year it will be a city. So it's a lot to learn, a lot of discoveries, a lot of new things to do, new changes, new laws, and I'm here willing to learn as much as I can, and just want to remember everybody that there are 2 votes for City Council at large. Vote in your candidate and for me. Thank you. And thanks to the league also and everybody else that came. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. And Mr. King.
So the last word, I don't usually get the last word, so I appreciate the opportunity to have discussed these issues in your presence today. The role of City Council is vital in our new city. I think it's also task-specific. We're the legislative branch. We will ask questions, make suggestions, and ultimately reject or accept budgets, policies, and procedures. It's important to remember we will not be running the government. We will not be responsible for the day-to-day operations of Framingham. That will be up to one of the 2 people who take the stage in a few minutes. I believe it's important to elect people to this council throughout the city who know and embrace the role of city councilor. People who understand government and its functions, can offer valuable and needed oversight and input. At the same time, respect the roles that they are playing in this new and emerging government. This is how I believe our new government will thrive. I hope I've made the case today that I can be such a candidate, and I thank you very much for taking the time to come out here this afternoon to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. King. A round of applause for all the candidates. Thank you to all the at-large city council candidates for their participation today. And I also want to thank the League of Women Voters of Framingham for inviting me out here today. I learned a lot about Framingham, and I'm glad I was able to be here today. We will now have a 5 to 10 minute break before the mayoral debate. Would the mayoral candidates please come to the stage?